Motorsport is an expensive business. Unlike football or rugby, whose growth was overseen by the rise of working-class players and teams in the 19th century, the pre-war era of Grand Prix racing was the complete opposite, as aristocrats, royalty and other extremely wealthy men partook in what was probably the fastest hobby on earth. Just like other sports such as horse racing, the reason why driving cars requires so much money is due to the equipment you need. Even in the early years of Formula 1 during the 1950s, not only would you need a car, but you'd also require engineers, team managers, and many spare parts to run a successful racing team. The first F1 champion, Giuseppe Farina, was the son of a successful coach builder and studied either political science or engineering at university. Throughout the years, as the advent of sponsorship came in towards the end of the 1960s and motor racing became a more mainstream sport, it attracted a more diverse audience from different classes of people, which allowed for less well-off drivers to come to fruition where previously they wouldn't have even had a chance. It's a well-known story that the seven-time F1 champion Lewis Hamilton's dad Anthony worked 3 jobs to keep his son's karting career going until he was spotted by the McLaren Junior team in his early teens, and several others, such as Johnny Herbert and Esteban Ocon, come to mind, but there are also countless drivers who came from extremely wealthy backgrounds. Lance Stroll is an obvious choice for modern-day F1, but if you trawl through the archives, most of them tend to have affluent parents who own businesses and thus could fund their children's careers. The only competitors who are independently rich tend to be those who saw success, such as Michael Schumacher, who amassed a net worth exceeding £500 million during his 20-year span in the sport, but there are also some who find their riches off the track. Dutch driver Robert Doornbos, who drove for Minardi and Red Bull in the mid-2000s, set up Kiru, a business that sells adult toys designed for pleasure. There are lots of others who created motorsport businesses, from driver coaching and management like Fernando Alonso and Mark Webber, to racetrack ownership like 1980s stalwarts Jonathan Palmer. However, of all the independently wealthy F1 drivers, in my opinion, there is one who stands above the rest. Let me tell you the story of the richest F1 driver you've never heard of.
Juan Manuel Fangio is in the lead on the last lap of the German Grand Prix.
Jim Clark drives the Formula One Motorsport to victory on the racetracks of the world.
And look at that! How that colossally, that's Mansell! That is Nigel Mansell! Alain Prost has taken the advantage. Senna is trying to go through on the inside, and it's happened immediately! This is amazing! Senna goes off at the first corner.
And I've got to stop because I've got a lump in my throat.
Paolo Barilla was born on the 20th of April 1961 in Milan in Italy and began his racing career remarkably late by modern standards, although maybe not so much as was common at the time, at the age of 14 in 1975. He won the 1976 Italian 100cc karting title and by 1980 had advanced to car racing, entering the Formula Fiat Abarth series, taking 1 podium and 10 points to finish 11th in the standings in a field that housed future F1 prospects Emanuele Pirro and Alessandro Nannini. The year after, he moved to race full-time in Italian Formula 3, where he won back-to-back at Varano and Ennepegusa, and eventually took 3rd place in the Drivers' Championship at the end of the year, this time beating his adversary Pirro and many other future faces in the top category of motorsport in Enzo Coloni, Mauro Baldi and Lamberto Leone. He also dabbled in other F3 competitions, doing part-time stints in the European category and the one-off event in Monaco. 1982 saw him step up to European Formula 2 driving for Giancarlo Minardi's team. He opened the season with 7th in Silverstone, a retirement in Hockenheim and another 7th at Fruxton, then was 15th at the Nürburgring, retired in Mugello and was 11th in Vallelunga. He failed to qualify for the Po Grand Prix, then got consecutive 12th places in Spa and another race at Hockenheim. A disqualification at Donington Park came before retirements at Mantorp Park in Sweden and Ennepegusa, then he was 8th at the season finale in Misano. He was pointless and unclassified in the standings at season's end, despite his teammate, a returning Nannini, scoring 8 points from a 5th in Silverstone and a 2nd in Misano. Barilla did only 1 race in Euro F2 in 1983 at Zolder, where he retired, but he spent the majority of his time driving for Lancia in both the World Sports Car and European Endurance Championships, doing 3 races in each, getting 6 points in both series. He continued his focus on endurance racing the year after, finishing 10th in World Sports Cars in another part-time campaign, taking 11th at the Le Mans 24-hour race, also becoming a test driver for the Brabham F1 team. Then in 1985, Barilla got his first major success on a global stage. Driving a Porsche 956B alongside Klaus Ludwig and John Winter, he won the 24 Hours of Le Mans by over 3 laps from the next car. Aside from his win at one of the Triple Crown events, he did part-time schedules in Interserie, where he won all 3 races he entered, sports cars, and the Renault Alpine V6 Turbo Championship. He resumed his F1 testing duties in 1986, this time for the newly rebranded Benetton team, and continued his endurance campaign, winning the last round of the prototype season in Fuji, driving another 956 alongside Piercarlo Ghinzani. The main bulk of his season, though, came in IMSA GT racing, where he took 3 podiums, including a victory at the Museum Park Street Circuit in Miami alongside Bob Wallach. Barilla had become somewhat of a journeyman in motorsport, competing in open-wheel junior formulas, sports cars and prototypes, GT racing, and now in 1987, he would dabble in touring car racing, driving 6 rounds in the World Touring Car Championship, driving an Alfa Romeo, albeit without any large success. He returned to open-wheel cars too by competing in the International Formula 3000, having dipped his toes in the water by returning at the Le Mans Bugatti circuit the year prior. Using a Rolls chassis, he was underwhelming, as in the 11-race season, he didn't score a single point and only got 3 top 10s, with 2 8ths in Po and Imola and 7th in Annapagusa. He rebroadened his horizons in 1988 by continuing in F3000, but also did 8 races in European and Japanese sports cars, 1 entry in IMSA and another in the Asia Pacific Touring Car Championship. In F3000, he scored his first points in a European feeder series since his F3 campaign in 1981 by getting 4th at Brands Hatch, and he did get solitary podiums in IMSA and European sports cars. However, in 1989, he moved away from the Western world and instead opted to take part in the All Japan F3000 series full-time. He only scored points once, with a 2nd place in Mine, but this opened a door for him later in the season. Following a test with the Minardi team that he'd driven for earlier in the decade in Junior Series, Barilla made the step up to Formula 1 and made his Grand Prix debut at the Suzuka circuit. Presumably, he was selected due to his knowledge of the track from his time in Japan, and he replaced Pierluigi Martini. Obviously, this race is steeped in history as it staged the intense fight between Ayrton Senna and Alain Prost that eventually saw the pair come together at the Casio Triangle chicane and saw Barilla's ex-Minardi teammate in Junior Series, Alessandro Nannini, take his only F1 win for Benetton. But further down the grid, Barilla was making his debut. His counterpart in the other car, future Hispania team principal Luis Perez-Sala, qualified 14th on a 1-minute 42.283, and his rookie teammate was 5 places back in 19th on a 1-minute 42.78. As much as I want to criticise a guy who could hardly perform in European or Japanese F3000, Paolo put in a decent performance here, only being half a second behind his much more experienced colleague. However, both Minardi cars retired on lap 1 despite a flying start from Barilla as his clutch went bust, and Perez-Sala retired from a collision. His debut wasn't exactly bells and whistles amazing, but at the same time it wasn't embarrassingly awful. After his showing in Suzuka, he was signed to a full-time deal with Minardi in 1990, alongside the man he deputised for in the Far East. Pierluigi qualified on the front row of the grid at the opening round of the season in Phoenix due to the grid being shaken up by the Friday qualifying session being the only dry one that weekend. Meanwhile, Barilla was only 14th, 2.5 seconds off his teammate, and he had to retire from the race on lap 54 due to physical exhaustion. He was 1.3 seconds and 9 positions behind Martini in Interlagos qualifying, then had engine failure on lap 38. During preparation for the Imola weekend, Pierluigi cracked his heel as a result of a collision with the Benetton of Alessandro Nannini, and thus had to withdraw from the event. Nonetheless, despite not starting, his fastest time from the Friday session was still 2.2 seconds quicker than Barilla's best in qualifying, and the slower Paolo managed to take his first race finish in 11th place 2 laps down on race winner Riccardo Patrese on Sunday. Martini was back for Monaco and qualified 8th, meanwhile Barilla continued to struggle, down in 19th and 1.2 seconds behind, albeit that was his closest gap so far to his teammate all season. The faster of the pair retired on lap 7 with electrical problems, but Paolo managed to survive the typical Monte Carlo attrition and ran in the top 10 for several laps. Unfortunately, however, he succumbed to gearbox failure on lap 52. The gap to Martini was 2.2 seconds in Montreal qualifying, but as the performance of the Minardi as a whole had dropped off that weekend, 16th for Pierluigi was coupled with 29th for his slower teammate. The problem with this was that only the top 26 drivers could start any F1 race at the time, and thus Barilla chalked up the first did not qualify of his career, 8 tenths away from the cutoff. In Mexico, the gap was 1.4 seconds with Paolo 16th, and the team had their first double finish of the year, with the pair on race day coming home 12th and 14th, with Barilla a lap behind Martini. The slower Italian got another DNQ in Paul Ricard, although he was unlucky to be less than a tenth away from the top 26 and only 7 tenths away from Martini, the first time the gap between the two had been less than a second in qualifying all season. He was 1.1 seconds slower than his teammate in Silverstone, qualifying in 24th place before claiming 12th on race day, then failed to qualify in Hockenheim 2.5 seconds down on Pierluigi in 28th. At Hungary, the gap was 1.7 seconds, although he was inside the top 26, and in the main event was 15th and last of everyone still running up the checkered flag. He was 1.5 seconds in Spa, then on lap 1 crashed heavily at Eau Rouge and retired. A 2-second gap at Monza put him 28th and not in the race. Then he was in the same position in Estoril, 1.5 seconds off of Martini. At the third to last race of the season in Jerez, he qualified in, you guessed it, 28th place, this time 2.2 seconds off his teammate. This streak of 3 failures to qualify in a row seemed to be the last straw for Minardi, as Barilla was replaced for the final 2 races of the season in Suzuka and Adelaide by Gianni Morbidelli. Paolo was unable to find another seat in F1 and turned back to endurance racing and touring cars for 1991. However, following his relatively abysmal stint in Formula 1, Barilla found success elsewhere. Remember when I talked about the likes of Robert Dornbos or Jonathan Palmer at the start of the video, drivers who showed relatively little in terms of on-track performance, yet managed to get rich outside of the car? Well, this is where the title of this video comes in. After his retirement from serious racing in 1991, aged 30, Paolo Barilla soon became the joint owner of the family business, Barilla Food Group. The company is the world's largest producer of pasta and in 2022 earned a staggering revenue of €4.7 billion. Alongside his brothers Guido and Luca and his sister Emanuela, they co-owned the business, and thus Paolo was one of the richest sports people in history, despite never doing anything noteworthy in the sports industry itself. To give a comparison, Barilla is like former Arsenal player Matteo Flamini, who wasn't that spectacular in his football playing career, yet has co-founded a biochemicals company and is now worth £10 billion. Paolo isn't that rich, only being worth $1.4 billion as of 2017, but nonetheless it's ironic how one of the most mediocre drivers of the last 40 years managed to become more independently wealthy than the likes of Michael Schumacher and Lewis Hamilton. He never out-qualified or out-raced either Perez-Sala or Martini, but out of those two, especially Pierluigi, they were more experienced drivers, and although some of the 2 or more second qualifying gaps can't be explained purely by experience, I think Barilla wasn't exactly awful. He was just another of those mediocre F3000 drivers who never operated at a level to deserve a seat in F1 without a big wad of cash following him everywhere he went. He only scored points once in F2 and Formula 3000 combined, and although we saw more success in endurance racing, even winning at Le Mans, that tends to be a trend amongst Formula 1 rejects. Anyways, with that being said, I think that brings today's video to a close. I hope you enjoyed me detailing the career of F1's richest driver, and if you did, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe to see more content from me in the future. Big shout out to my Patreon subscribers Andy Lamberts and Eamon Al-Dowdy, and if you'd like to get access to videos a day early, or simply support the channel, you can join my Patreon for as little as $1 per month. You can also follow my Instagram and Twitter or X or whatever it's called for behind the scenes updates and access to me rambling about why a certain part of F1 is utter bollocks. Here's a snippet of that action right now on your screen. Without further ado though, I'm Nedzo, and I'll see you all later. Bye!